Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie, broadcasting on our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m, broadcasting on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on TikTok. And as always on TikTok, the best viewing experience will be had at our youtube.com or our facebook.com pages. And we have a guest this evening coming up at the bottom of the hour. It is the great Ash, that Preston journalist. Really looking forward to speaking with Ash, and we're going to be talking about what's basically going on at the British Parliament these days and what it bodes for the future, and we'll have a lot to knock about the park as far as that is concerned. Hello to Paul. Got a comment there which we'll read out in a moment, and Adam's got a few things to say also here. The owners of a pub in Carmarthenshire say they have been left feeling on edge after anti-English graffiti was spray painted. Well, we don't like to hear about that because that's just utter ignorance. Utter ignorance. Imagine that still being around in the 21st century. Well, we don't have to imagine because we face it every day. There's always somebody or some people on our platforms telling us if we don't like it to go and live in England. Well, no, we're going to live in Scotland, which is our country, thank you very much. But there is unfortunately that strain of some people, and hopefully they'll grow up. Hopefully it's just one of these youthful things that some people will grow out of. Derek says, greetings Alistair and unionists around the world. And good to see Ashley on tonight's show. I know, it's very good. Looking forward to seeing Ashley and speaking with them this evening. Hello to Susie. Rally to the flag, folks, she says. TR18 says, the last Brexiteer has now left the government. What are our opinions on that? Well, we'll talk with Ashley about that. But what, if you don't know about that, Suella Braverman has tendered her resignation. She's tendered it about a couple of hours ago. Yes, well, do you know, we want to begin by saying something that we've got some exciting news about some new activism, forthcoming activism, and we need help, and we're calling all people in Edinburgh for this particular activism. Now, let me tell you what that's about. Today is the 19th of October, and it's next year on the 19th of October that the Scottish nationalists are going to pretend to have a referendum. That's when they're hoping to hold it, is on this day next year, which will be a Thursday, the 19th of October. Now, they're not going to be able to do that, of course, because it's almost too early to organise such a thing. Too late, rather, to organise such a thing. But they're hoping that somehow the case that's going through the Supreme Court at the moment will find in their favour. And if it does, they're going to, so they say, hold a referendum next year on this day, the 19th of October. Well, that's very unlikely to happen. However, what's more likely to happen is that sometime in the next 2 weeks to 2 months, we don't know, the Supreme Court is going to come back with its judgment, and that judgment is going to be that the Scottish Parliament is unable to hold a referendum for various legal technical reasons. They're not going to make a grand political statement like we would make here on A Force for Good about why they shouldn't be able to hold one. It'll be based around some legal technicality, some reading of the Scotland Act that will probably find that they're not able to hold one. However, on that day, when they release that judgment, the Scottish nationalists are planning to have a big rally outside Holyrood in the late afternoon, and they're hoping to be able to fly the flags, and they're hoping to cry and moan and have a big pity party outside Holyrood for the benefit of the television cameras, for nothing else other than that, for the benefit of the television cameras. Now, as I say, we don't know what day that is, other than it will be a weekday, and it'll be mid to late afternoon outside Holyrood. They're going to be having their cry and moan pity party. We, A Force for Good, are going to go along at the same time. Okay, now that'll be fun. and I'll have my megaphone, and we'll have folk there with some flags, and we'll have some posters which are spelling out the sort of things, the sort of truths that we're talking about. We only need a small number of us, folks. But if you're watching and if you live in that area, Edinburgh or thereabouts, and you can make it to Holyrood at short notice, then please contact us. Because what we're going to do is we're going to build up a list of people that have said, I'm going to try to be there. Keep me informed. And if you're one of those people, please do contact at aforceforgood.uk. Okay, we'll add you to our list, and on that day, as soon as we hear, we will alert you to say all systems go, and we'll give you the meeting point, and as usual, we'll supply all the materials. Okay, so what we need now is names of people in the Edinburgh area or thereabouts who can get to Edinburgh at short notice for mid to late afternoon on a weekday. You tell us that you may be able to make it. We'll add you to our list, and please contact us about that. So it's going to be like a very, we'll be ready just to drop everything and go at a minute's notice. We need to know if you're going to be able to join us there at that time. So if you think that sometime in the next 2 weeks to 2 months you'll be able to join us, contact us, please. Contact at aforceforgood.uk. We'll put together a list of people, and we'll get down there, and we'll make sure that the pro-UK voice is heard. We'll make sure that we make it clear to the television cameras that those people, the Scottish Nationalists, do not represent the majority of people in Scotland, and that we, A Force for Good, will be standing up for the pro-UK majority. And what sort of things will we be talking about? Exactly what I'm about to speak to you in a minute. Yes, so what sort of things will we be talking about? Well, here's one of the major things that we'll be talking about, and it's our right to self-determine a Scotland within the United Kingdom. What do I mean by that? The Scottish National Party made a submission to the Supreme Court on this particular matter, and thanks to the National, which I read so that you don't have to, they were able to tell me what was in the Scottish Nationalist submission, and crucial to it is the right to self-determination. Says, quote, regardless of the outcome of any subsequent general election to the UK Parliament, the people of Scotland's right to self-determination cannot be advanced through that legislature, meaning that regardless of whatever people vote for in Scotland at a British general election, the people of Scotland's right to self-determination cannot be advanced through that legislature. What a load of utter rubbish. Wrong in so many ways. Wrong on so many levels. And let me tell you 4 levels on which that is utterly wrong. Firstly, what does the phrase self-determination mean? Well, according to Chambers' 20th century, it is, quote, the power of a population to decide its own government and political relations. So in other words, self-determination in a modern democracy simply means using your vote to vote for whatever politician or party that you want to vote for at whatever election you want to vote for, whether that may be a devolved election, whether it may be a referendum, whether it may be the British election. So that's exactly what we have today. Each one of us has our own self-determination, which is exercised politically through our vote at the ballot box, at whatever referendum or election we happen to bother ourselves to vote in. We have self-determination, and that means as a nation, at least as far as the people who bother to vote are concerned, that nation also has self-determination in a democracy. Self-determination is not denied to anybody in a democracy. So it's through all elections to Parliament that the people of Scotland exercise their right to self-determination. So to tell us that our right to self-determination cannot be advanced, to use the words of the SNP's submission to the Supreme Court, to tell us that while we are actually engaged in the exercise of self-determination by voting representatives to go to that parliament to tell us that our right to self-determination cannot be advanced through that mechanism that we are engaging in is complete. It doesn't even make sense. It's absurd. We're literally engaged in the act of self-determination when we vote at a parliamentary election. But here's the thing. What, of course, they mean is they don't actually mean self-determination. They don't actually mean the people of Scotland's right to self-determination. They mean, in their view, the people of Scotland's right to independence. That's what they mean. They're swapping out the phrase. They're swapping the phrase self-determination for independence. That's what they really mean when they talk about the people of Scotland's right to self-determination. They mean the people of Scotland's right to independence. Okay, and also when they use that phrase, the people of Scotland's right to self-determination, they're not including us in that definition of the people of Scotland. Okay, they're not including us, the people of Scotland, who exercise our self-determination and our right of self-determination to stay in the UK. They're not including us when they talk about the people of Scotland's right to self-determination. We're not meant to be included in that phrase. The SNP is not referring to those of us in Scotland who want the British Parliament to maintain our right to continue to self-determination, to continue to self-determine in a Scotland within the United Kingdom. Okay, I'm going to say that again. The SNP is not referring to those of us in Scotland who want the British Parliament to maintain our right to continue to self-determine in a Scotland within the UK. They're not referring to those of us in Scotland who want the British Parliament to protect our right to continue to self-determine in a Scotland within the UK. They're not talking about those of us in Scotland who want the British Parliament to promote our right to continue to self-determine in a Scotland which remains part of the UK. They're not talking about the people of Scotland who have a right to self-determination within the UK. We're not included in their definition because, as I say, they use the phrase self-determination to really mean independence. And fourthly, it's dangerous to pretend that we don't have self-determination, because if you give the impression, the mistaken impression, that there's no democratic path to getting what you want, then that's not only wrong, but it's dangerous, because you're encouraging some people who don't know any better to think, well, there's no legal route to what I want, so I'm going to do something illegal. And we've cautioned about the rhetoric of SNP MPs before on this particular matter. They don't realise that they're playing with fire when they pretend that there's no legal route, because they're just encouraging some people to do illegal things. So we're going to be hearing a lot more in the coming months about the people of Scotland's right to self-determination being somehow denied. And it's going to be for us at A Force for Good to point out the reality, which is that we are already a self-determining people. We are already a self-determining nation. We exercise our self-determination at the ballot box. And in that regard, those of us who want to stay in the UK have a right to maintain our union. We have a right to protect our union. We have a right to promote our union. And we have a right to stay in the UK. And the least we should expect is that our British Parliament will maintain, protect and promote our right to self-determine within the UK. And we spoke about this also last week when we wrote an article. Well, we spoke about it for we spoke about it, and then we wrote an article which we published called "We Have a Right to Stay in the UK." Because I see this a lot, especially reading the Scottish press, is that these debates, the debates are always framed from the perspective of the moaning Scottish nationalists. It's like they're moaning about them not getting their way. What can we do to try to help them to get their way? That's always the perspective of every article that's written on this particular matter. It's never written from our perspective, from the perspective of people who want to maintain the union, who want to protect the union, who want to promote the union, and how can we best continue to do those things. It's never, articles are never written from those perspectives. Well, that's got to change, and that's what we're about here at A Force for Good. Now, we've got a guest coming up in around 10 minutes, which is, of course, the great Ash from Preston, otherwise known as That Preston Journalist, who's knocking a lot of videos out these days, several a day actually, just short videos. We'll be talking to him about that, and really looking forward to him joining just at the bottom of the hour. Now, just before the bottom of the hour, I'll ask you a question, and the winner will receive this cloth Union Jack patch. And you know what, we'll also throw in a Union Jack keyring as well. How does that look? The winner of the prize. So we'll ask you a question at the bottom of the hour, and send your answer please to contact@aforceforgood.uk. Now, it's time for On This Day in British History Matters. On this day in British History Matters, because we don't know where we're going if we don't know where we are, and we don't know where we are if we don't know where we have been. And it was on this day, the 19th of October in 1901, that a piece of music was first heard for the first time, and it was called Pomp and Circumstance March Number 1, performed for the first time today in Liverpool by the Liverpool Orchestral Society. And that was the piece of music that was created by a composer called Edward Elgar. And we have a photo here of Elgar, and really nice photograph there. That's actually Hereford Cathedral, and you'll see there's three people there at the front looking up at Hereford Cathedral, and there's a gentleman there leaning against his bicycle. But if we actually take a closer look at that fellow, we'll see it's a statue, and I really like that statue. I mean, that's absolutely excellent. That's a recent statue as well of Edward Elgar, who lived for a while in Hereford and must have been inspired by Hereford Cathedral. Let's swap back to that other picture as well to see it in perspective. There he is, looking up at the cathedral spires. Good old Eddie. So he put together that piece of music, and King Edward VII heard it and thought it should be set to words. Okay, and so Arthur Benson came up with the words to put together to put over Pomp and Circumstance number 1, and that has come to us as the song which we're just going to play right now on this little video.
Why
fantastic. That's what a version that is as well. Vera Lynn singing Land of Hope and Glory, which was the words that Arthur Benson put to the music Pomp and Circumstance by Edward Elgar, which was first performed today, 19th of October in 1901. And perhaps these words, Land of Hope and Glory, Mother of the Free, I think these days they're perhaps more aspirational rather than descriptive necessarily of reality. And that's okay. That's okay. Especially, I don't want to get too political about a song, but, some of our freedoms have been compromised, no question about that, over the last 2 or 3 years in a very bad way by people that we would normally trust to govern us appropriately. And so, as I say, these lyrics are aspirational, but that's okay because they inspire us to something better. And that's perhaps how that song should be understood these days. Not so much a boast of glories past, but as a motivation to aspire to great things to come. And as British people, we're lucky to have that kind of standard of music in our past as well, in order to inspire us and motivate us going forward. Good stuff. I see that our guest Ash is in the waiting room, and we're just going to bring Ash on in a couple of minutes. Christopher says, I would encourage all of us who dislike Scottish nationalism to visit notesonnationalism.com for a breakdown of the Scottish National Party's concept of a new currency with borders, which is absolutely bonkers. I mean, I was reading The National because you don't have to. I read it so that you don't have to. And they ask these talking heads to give their considered opinion on it, and this person's going on about how there wasn't quite enough information about the hard border and how the extent to which the hard border would actually bring in more money than it would lose if it did this or whatever with the EU, etc. I mean, trying to have a serious conversation around something as crackpot as a hard border between Scotland and England. Utterly crackpot idea. Never in the history of the Union has such crackpotism ever been taken seriously, and such crackpots have been able to actually make a living talking crackpotism. It's incredible some of these NGOs in Scotland today. You give them a stupid idea and enough money and they'll basically write papers about things that shouldn't even be considered. I mean, it's just, what? I mean, incredible stuff. Incredible stuff. All the usual suspects, of course, talking nonsense. None of it worth reading out. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please do say hello to our good friend and colleague Ash, and please do ask Ash questions as well. And if we see the questions, we'll ask Ash. Hello, Ash.
Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you loud and clear. Thank you very much for coming on the show, Ash. How are you this evening?
Very good, thank you. I've had a bit of a job doing my prep for this because I thought I'd done it, and then Suella Braverman went, and there's actually some more breaking news now if you'd like to hear it.
Oh gosh, tell us.
Tory Chief Whip Wendy Morton has just resigned, as well as the Tory Deputy Chief Whip, which is Craig Whittaker, have both just resigned.
Okay.
So we've got a government in full-on collapse at the moment.
That's incredible. It really is incredible. What do you make... And some of our viewers may not be aware that Suella Braverman resigned about a couple of hours ago, and she resigned ostensibly over a mistake that she claimed to have made regarding some kind of diplomatic procedure or something like that. And she wrote a lengthy letter about it. Have you seen this letter, Ash, that Suella Braverman wrote?
Yeah.
So what do you make of all of that?
She sent her an email from her personal email, and it contains sensitive information, and obviously you've got a works email for a reason, i.e. a parliamentary email, a ministerial email, and it's broken parliamentary procedure. But strong rumours from other commentators who work in the Commons is that this row is not about the email. This is about immigration. Liz Truss actually wants to increase immigration, as does Jeremy Hunt, whereas Suella Braverman was very open about the fact that she wanted to bring immigration down massively, so we can send people off to Rwanda, get the Albanians back to Albania, etc. And they didn't like it. So really it was any excuse to get rid of her, by the sounds of it, out of the government.
Yes, indeed. Well, for those of us looking on, she was but the only voice of common sense in many ways that we knew about anyway. Definitely. And I was glad when she was made Home Secretary, because I thought, well, there you go. There's an opportunity. There's a possibility. And so, but for her to resign as well is quite shocking, absolutely shocking. And I'll just fire up her letter here. We've got her letter, and I wanted to just quote from it. I don't know if you can see that there, but in the third paragraph down, I'll just read it out. It says, "It is obvious to everyone that we are going through a tumultuous time. I have concerns about the direction of this government. Not only have we broken key pledges that were promised to our voters, but I have had serious concerns about this government's commitment to honouring manifesto commitments such as reducing overall migration numbers and stopping illegal migration, particularly the dangerous small boats crossing." So it may be that she was saying, well, I can't do my job here under this sort of leadership, and so she just has to get out, which I can understand. Go ahead.
The people that are running the place now, Jeremy Hunt is all but Prime Minister. Liz Truss has absolutely no authority left whatsoever. She looks like a whipped puppy sat in Parliament while Jeremy Hunt speaks to the Commons, acting like he's Prime Minister. The guy is an EU-loving globalist. His wife works on Chinese state TV. She's Chinese herself. He endorsed the Chinese approach to COVID openly on the media during the pandemic. This guy is not a conservative, and to be honest with you, he never has been. And let's face it, Liz Truss was an EU Remainer who claimed to now be a converted Brexiteer, and she also used to be a Lib Dem, so you've got to question whether she's a conservative or not. The only conservative voices in that government now were Suella Braverman, Kemi Badenoch, Jacob Rees-Mogg and Steve Baker. And I would lay good money on the fact that they will try and get rid of those three as well, as quickly as they can.
Would you see it as a kind of plot? Do you think it's a plot here, or do you just think that it's just typical kind of uselessness and infighting? Because the Tories are great at infighting. This is something that the SNP don't do. Like, if the SNP have a problem, they keep it in house. Okay, they don't wash the dirty linen in public. And if Sturgeon says something really ignorant, like what she said 10 days ago, "I detest Tories," everybody rallies behind her. Everybody. Yeah. If they either agree with her or they'll make some kind of excuse for her, but they'll stand by her. And then when she gives a speech, you see it on Twitter, all the MPs, all the MSPs, they all put out stuff. "What a great speech. Fantastic. You were amazing today, Nicola." All this sort of stuff. It's all like cohesion. Whereas a Tory says something mildly controversial and all the other MPs go, "Oh, I don't believe that." Well, I agree with most of what he says, but I don't agree with that. No, they all, none of them stick together, and that's why they're, as a party, they're weak. It's a class thing as well. It's like a kind of Tory. It's an attempt to get to be socially accepted. Okay, people on the left, hard left, Scottish nationalism, they don't care about that. You can think of me what you want, is their impression. But Tory types of people, they have to be like socially they have to be like, everybody has to like them and they have to go along with the crowd. So it's a weakness. It's a weakness, not just a Tory weakness, but it's a kind of class weakness, I think, at a particular level. But to get back to the point you were about to say there.
Oh, it's undoubtedly a plot. Look at
right.
It's a way of basically taking any rights away from the members who pay the £25 a year every year to be part of the Conservative Party. The MPs didn't want Boris, yet they had to let him in. because the membership favoured him so strongly, and they would never have got the majority without him. Let's face it, like him or not, he's an election-winning machine. They didn't want someone like Kemi Badenoch, an actual Tory, get into the final round of the leadership contest. They didn't want Liz Truss winning it. They wanted Rishi Sunak to win it. They would have preferred Jeremy Hunt in the last round of leadership elections in 2019, before Boris won it. And now they've finally got their way. They will gang up on anyone they don't like. Just look at the people who celebrated and made comments internationally, when Liz Truss had to reverse her budget. People like Klaus Schwab at the WEF, people like the German Chancellor, people like Joe Biden. These ultimate globalist people who believe in a one world government and everything, these people were celebrating when Truss had to go back on her conservative agenda, and that's what it was, of course, at the time. Low tax, high wages, high growth. And when she had to reverse that for this now socialist budget we've got, they were all celebrating. And it's no coincidence. And they're trying to get rid of her as fast as they can. They're replacing any Tory in the cabinet, like I said before, with anybody who believes in this globalist agenda. And it's a complete coup. And the members, Tory MPs now want to change the rules of the 22 committee, which will stop members having a say in the next leadership contest, whenever that'll be. So what's the point in being a member if you don't even have a say in what goes on in the party? If I was a Tory member, I'd be ripping up my membership card now and telling them I'm never voting for them again.
Do you know, that's a really good point that not a lot of people will really have thought of, because a lot of people just look on it and they think, oh, it's just like chaos because they're not very good politicians. But it as you say, it makes perfect sense that a certain amount of Tories, I'm not saying this is what's actually happening, but it sounds very like it could very possibly be happening, is that they don't want what the membership chose, and so they're going to get rid of that person and they're going to bring in their own people and back to business as usual, back to the globalist agenda. And of course you've also got the whole question of the mass media, the BBC and many of the newspapers and many of the mainstream correspondents, political correspondents. They were all totally against Brexit. They were all for Remainers. They've never forgiven the British people for, amazingly, that peaceful revolution, as it were, was back in 2016 when the people actually voted for Brexit. Nobody expected that. The mass media did not expect that. The Tory party did not expect it. The Tory party did not want it. This is what people forget. I mean, you had here, and Susie Davis makes the point, she goes, Mark Francois and other members are still sound. Back in 2016, you had that. Those people were for Brexit, but that's only a small group of people in the Conservative Party, and they're all backbenchers.
They've got no chance of getting into government ever.
With no chance of getting into government ever, no. So the mainstream Tory party, as measured by the MPs and the people who control the Tory party, did not want Brexit, and they've never really wanted Brexit. And these people who are Remainers, who have come to be Brexiteers, they're just reluctant Brexiteers, really. It's not, they're trying, and that's why we've never really had a proper Brexit. The potential of Brexit has not yet been realised. You know, you get these people in the SNP particularly going, well, isn't Brexit turning out to be a complete disaster? Well, we haven't really had Brexit properly. I mean, the whole Northern Ireland thing wasn't dealt with properly. And the potential of Brexit politically and economically and culturally and so on, there's really nothing very much has happened as a result of that, because the party doesn't want to make it happen. And I'm not knocking the Tories here. The whole political British establishment doesn't want it to happen. And they all want to get back in. And the media want to get rid of this Tory government, get a Labour government in, and then work their magic somehow to get the Labour Party to try to get us back in to the EU. That's the long-running agenda. This isn't something that's just day to day. This is like they've sorted it out in their heads. And it's like we've got to get back in within 10 years or whatever. And they'll be working to a plan. The media will be working to a plan to get us back in. And that, firstly, it requires getting rid of the Tories, you know.
What they'll do for people like Keir Starmer, I don't believe for a second he's changed his views. But don't forget, he was one of the people going to and from Brussels all the time, trying to overturn our votes and everybody else who voted for Brexit. He will take us as close as possible to the EU without actually being official members. He'll have all the legislation on our statute books. He may even bring in some form of freedom of movement again. It wouldn't surprise me at all. I think that's exactly where we're heading. You're exactly right. They've never forgiven the public for daring to defy the establishment. And let's not forget, David Cameron would never have given the people of this country that vote if it wasn't for two things. Firstly, of course, UKIP, because Farage and UKIP scared the living daylights out of the establishment. And secondly, Cameron would never have won the election if he'd not promised that referendum. And that's the only reason we got it. And thirdly, as you correctly said, they never, ever, ever thought that the British public would vote to leave and defy the establishment.
Yes, absolutely. Do you think, I mean, you mentioned the referendum there, and because of UKIP, do you think, like Nigel Farage and these smaller fringe parties, do you think they've got a potential moving forward as a result of all of this?
Well, Reform are just reporting they've had the biggest surge in membership they've ever seen. So that could be a positive sign. However, with Reform, I think they're the main candidate to get an MP if anyone's going to. But Reform have two competent leaders in Dr. David Ball and Richard Tice, but unfortunately they're not very inspiring leaders. And I think for the Reform to make any sort of dent or even get one or two MPs, they're going to need a big hitter, and that big hitter has to be Nigel Farage. I'm amazed he's not made any bigger noises yet, but he's certainly been more active recently, and there are rumours that he's planning to come back. And I think the scene couldn't be set any better for a Farage-type character who can galvanise such support to come back and potentially win a seat.
Yes. And even if he didn't win a seat, or if the party didn't win a seat, they would make a huge dent in the Tory vote, as they would have done at the last general election had Nigel not stood his candidates down.
Yeah.
And he stood his candidates down because I guess he presumed that Boris and the Tories were going to do what they said on the tin, especially as far as immigration is concerned. And of course, they've done the complete opposite. Opposite. I mean, it's beyond parody. And they've lost. They're in danger anyway of losing all the red wall seats, which were won on the back of a Brexit promise and reducing immigration promise, and they've just thrown that to the wind. 80-seat majority. They couldn't have made a worse job of it. It's really it's upsetting to see such a political incompetence, or maybe is what you're kind of implying there is maybe that's the globalist plan, because certainly globalism, as in open borders and absolute free movement of people, and indeed free movement of finance, is part of the globalist plan for the world, or at least for the Western world anyway.
Honestly, if the polls are anything to be believed, I know they're not going to be accurate, are they? But they're going to make this time they're going to make Tony Blair's victory look like a hung parliament. They're going to be wiped out to such an extent that I believe anyway the party will split, because what will happen is Labour will win a huge majority, and they will bring in proportional representation, or they'll at least have a referendum on it, one or the other, because this is a freak accident that's happened here, if you like, because Keir Starmer is not inspiring. He would never win a majority in normal times, but the Tories are so useless, Starmer doesn't have to say anything. He hasn't announced any policies, he's simply rising in the polls because the Tories are shooting themselves in the foot at every single term. So what they're going to do this time, Labour will bring in PR, and that will be the end of the Tory party. And it would also be the end of the duopoly, I suppose, with Labour. In my opinion, Labour would split into two parties, and the Tories will split into at least two parties. You'll have the right wing of the party, and you'll have your globalists. And it'll be something similar with the Labour Party. You'll have your more moderates, and then you'll have your hard left, like your Corbynites, and they'll go their own separate ways. And then you'll have a lot more parties vying for a lot more representation, because you'll be obviously under PR, you'll be able to get more representation.
That's another interesting and fascinating possibility. I would like to. I wonder about that. One thing you can be sure of is if Labour get in, they will be revolutionary, as they always are, and they will make big changes, because this is the big difference between in my view, between Conservatives and Labour. If Labour get power, they make big changes. I'm not saying for the good, often for the worst, as we've seen with various things under Blair, huge changes for the worst.
Yeah.
But they have an agenda, and it's like, this is how we are going to remake the country. Whereas the Tories, they don't remake it; they just manage decline, basically, and run from the left as much as they possibly can. That's when they're not agreeing and going along with the left for fear of being thought socially marginalised. So
not conservatives anymore. They're scared to be conservatives.
Yes, exactly. And if you've got an 80-seat majority and you can't bring in one or two like revolutionary policies, then what is the point of it? So that's what we'll get. We'll get another Labour Party, and they will be revolutionary. They may well abolish the House of Lords. They're talking about replacing it with the Senate of the Nations, which would, of course, be an absolute disaster, because it would just mirror the House of Commons. It would further balkanise the United Kingdom into the concept of 4 different countries rather than one country, which is what we as unionists like to try to keep promoting us as. So when you hear Gordon Brown's behind all of these constitutional changes, you know that it's just going to be like, it's not going to be a good thing. But the thing about proportional representation is interesting. I'm hung up about that. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing or what. Certainly in Scotland it works fairly well, I think, and you do get a reasonable reflection of the vote in Holyrood. And certainly if it was first past the post, if it was all first past the post in Scotland, the Tories would struggle to get anybody elected. But because there's the proportional representation element, they're actually the official opposition.
Of course, England and Wales is the complete opposite to Scotland in that respect, because first past the post breeds the establishment, if you will, the duopoly. It continues the Labour-Tory duopoly, and it feeds it, and it keeps them and many of these MPs in their safe seats where they've been sat there for 20, 30 years, and they've got nothing to worry about. They're in a job until they decide to retire on a nice big fat taxpayers' pension, and that's the problem with the system. I think there's no incentive for change, and there'll still be a lot of these Tory grandees when they get wiped out, whenever that may be, who will keep their seats because they've been there for so long. People aren't going to vote against them, and that's a massive problem. The scale of the infight, I can't overemphasise the scale of the infighting. Another commentator has just said that he's been told by a Tory MP when they were going for this vote before on fracking that whips were literally pushing Tory MPs through the right voting lobby, and Jacob Rees-Mogg was screaming at people to go through the right lobby. These people couldn't agree. Yeah, these people could not agree on the colour of an orange. They're finished. For many years to come, they're finished. There's no way back from this. Even if they brought Boris back, who, believe it or not, is top of the opinion polls to be the next Prime Minister in Tory member circles, they've done it to themselves. They're finished.
Yeah. Do you know what? You may well be right. There's certainly, as far as they're concerned, there doesn't seem to be much hope on the horizon at all, and it's a crazy state of affairs. You know, you brought in a lot of good points there that hadn't even occurred to me, and I hope have occurred to you. It won't have occurred to many of our viewers either. Handyman Sam says, I feel betrayed. I voted Tory last election because of their immigration policy. I don't want mass immigration. Who do I vote for now? Well, that's a good question.
People have got, isn't it?
Yeah. Christopher says, I think you're right. They're finished. They've self-immolated. Sandra says,
they've completely done it to themselves.
Do you think should we have a general election? Do you think that's an answer?
I don't see any alternative. We've got an ineffectual government, a Prime Minister in name only. What can Labour possibly be any worse than what we've got now? I don't see how it can get any worse. The only thing the Tories could hope for is that a general election now, the result's not quite as bad as they hope for, but then let Labour take the brunt of this mess that we're in, and I'd very much doubt Labour would be able to do anything much different to what the Tories are doing, and then they hope to come back with a better candidate in a few years' time when another snap election's called, possibly. That's the only thing they can hope for.
Yeah.
Who knows?
who knows? Each day is a new day, and each day brings all sorts of new revelations as well.
It's hard to keep up at the moment.
It's totally hard to keep up, but you've thrown a lot of good ideas into the ring for us to consider there. So your Twitter account there, if anybody would like to follow Ash, it's at AKWriting88, and your YouTube is youtube.com/thatprestonjournalist, and there you go, youtube.com thatprestonjournalist, all one word. So good stuff, Ashley. We've been speaking just for a few minutes more than we wanted to. We could have spoken a lot. We'll have you back on again during our Christmas crowdfunder. We're not quite sure how we're going to do it this year. We might have 10 one-hour programs, or we might have 1 10-hour program. We'll have to see. I'm leaning towards having 10 one-hour programs in the first fortnight of Christmas, of the Christmas break. We'll see, but you'll certainly be a guest on there as well, if not before. In fact, it would actually be quite a good thing to have you on very regularly, because we're quite a good a wee team here. We're sharing a brain, as they say.
Yeah, anytime. Yeah, just as always, just let me know, and I'm happy to come on always.
Okay, Ash, all the best, and thanks. Keep up the good work.
Yeah,
good night, sir.
Thank you, Alistair. Thanks, everyone. See you later.
See you. Great. Well, thank you to Ash there, and let's get rid of that banner. Send in your comments, folks, and tell us what you think of the show so far. Debbie says, good night, Ashley. Handyman Sam says, good man that, Ashley. He absolutely is. Nelson says, Ashley is great. Christopher says, go for 10 one-hour programs. Good advice, I think, Christopher. Stuart says, thanks, Ash. Alan says that the chaos will continue because the Conservatives know that a general election will not be good for them. I think that's possibly so. That's possibly so, Alan. We're going to be working soon on issue number 7. But in the meantime, we have a small number of these left. And when I say a small number, it's like less than 10. These are going to become collector's editions as we go forward. And if you don't have one, then there's a good chance you're not going to get one again unless you grab yours now at our shop, which is a forceforgood.uk/shop. Please do have a go at that. You can also get this book, Scotland Now, A Warning to the World, which is reduced from $15.99 to $12.99, and if you buy that, we'll throw in free a copy of 10 Years Strong, which is normally worth a £5. So that's another good deal. We're looking for people in Edinburgh who are able to, at short notice, are able to join us when the Supreme Court makes its decision. It will be a weekday, and it will be mid to late afternoon, and we'll only be able to give you several hours notice. But if you can join us outside Holyrood, please tell us, send us a message. Or if you just think that you might be able to, and that you'd like to be kept in the loop, then please do contact us at contact@aforceforgood.uk, and we'll add you to our list. And on the day, whenever that day may be, within the next 2 weeks to 2 months, we'll fire a message out to you. We'll contact you if we can by text or by email, and we'll tell you where to go and what to do. So please do, if you're in the Edinburgh area, contact us about that. We're going to be here, obviously, next week. Thank you to all the comments. Thank you to everybody on TikTok. Thank you especially to our guest tonight, Ash, that Preston journalist, whose YouTube page is well worth a follow, well worth a watch. And we'll be back next Wednesday. So it just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the King. See you next week.